Okay.
Hi, Vidya.
Hi, Kat.
How are you?
I'm really good, thank you.
Now, we have had just a couple of technical glitches. Our little, the link that I was just posting doesn't seem to be working. So I'm just going to write on the movers group where everyone can find us while people, we'll just take a second for people to find us. So while I'm doing that, do you want to introduce yourself and say where you are at beautiful Sierra?
Yeah. My name's Vidya, and I'm home right now, and I live in Andalusia in southern Spain, and I have a beautiful retreat center here called Surya, and so yeah, I'm here in my beautiful home, and yeah.
Oh, Vidya has stalled. Let's hope.
We're always this anymore.
I missed that. I missed that.
I said normally we have a lot of guests here, but at the moment it's pretty quiet. Has been quite quiet for the last 6 months. So it's really nice to be able to have some outreach to people out there in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be really odd because Sierra is, well, it's got the largest yoga studio in Europe, hasn't it? So you must be used to pretty big parties of people. And
yeah, we often have, especially during the peak season, we often have groups of over 60 people here. So it's been really amazingly quiet for the last 6 months, and in one way that's beautiful because it's a different experience to be here when it's peaceful and tranquil and hardly anyone around, and I can use my own pool. But but I do, I also miss being able to provide this sanctuary for people, really. I think that's what I really love about my work is just sharing it with other people. Like I created this place to share with other people, really, not for myself. So I do miss that part of it.
Yeah, for sure. I can see, and I know it's not an easy time as well for Sierra as well. So I really hope that you and your team get through this. Okay, not easy.
Yeah, me too.
It'll take a lot of yogic philosophy. Now tell me, because I know that your passion is yoga philosophy and taking yoga off the mat and how we can live a yogic life. How is it that you got into that, Vidya?
Well, I actually became, I think I was interested in it my whole life. I didn't actually discover it until I was about 19. But when I did discover Eastern philosophy, I felt like it was this thing that I'd been missing my whole life, and that was really something really intimately familiar to me. And it was kind of answered all the angst and questions I had about life as a child. And the moment I, first read some spiritual books, I just started to feel like, okay, this really resonates with me in a way that nothing else had up until then. And for me, it was just like a lot of personal transformation, or just like actually coming home, and I got into meditation when I was 19 as well. And up until then, I'd been quite, I didn't suffer from like clinical depression, I don't think, but I had sort of been really feeling like life was meaningless, and I just didn't really know what I wanted or anything like that. And I think when I discovered Eastern philosophy, it was suddenly I just became passionate about something, and I sort of found my calling, really, and life began to make sense to me, and it was just like a very magical time for me, really, and I haven't really looked back. I've been passionate about it ever since.
Oh,
yeah,
I know that it's definitely as well that my little delvings. It's definitely helping me to join the dots in life. And And now we're joined by lots of lovely people, which is wonderful. Thank you very much, guys, for finding us here on slightly different link. It's so good that you are delving into this yoga philosophy course, because there's so much to learn here, and Vidya has got so much wisdom. It would be great to crack on. So we've just started, all of us today together, with doing the first one in the series, which is Ahimsa. And it's really interesting. Dawn's got some questions already, and I love this. So should we crack on into the question first, do you think, Vidya, or would you like to talk about Ahimsa a bit first?
Yeah, I could say a few things about it first, because I think, I just think it's like one of the most important, essential parts of yoga practice, and not just yoga practice. I think most world religions kind of have this idea of non-harming, as at the core, or it's an essential part of any religious understanding. I think is that we respect other people as ourselves, and particularly in yoga philosophy, because you learn that actually, there is no separation, that we are one, and that we're just one consciousness manifesting in all these different forms. And like when you cause harm to any other living creature, it's actually like causing harm to yourself. And like having that kind of respect and love and for all sentient beings, I just think it's just essential. It's the first yama for a reason, I think, because all of the other yamas have to be practiced in the context of non-harming. So, for example, the next one that we're going to talk about is Satya. Tomorrow, I think. And Satya is truthfulness, but you can't practice truthfulness without the foundation of non-harming. So, so I think that it's really the foundation of all of the other yamas and niyamas. And I think it's vitally important. And it's also a practice, because as human beings, we're not naturally non-violent. I think we're, you could say that we're more naturally violent than we are non-violent. If you look at our history, or even if you just look at modern times, human beings are the most violent animal on the whole planet, So I think that it is something we have to work at, to be non-violent. And so it's a kind of ongoing practice, and I think obviously most of us are not practicing gross forms of violence, like hitting other people or physically violent. But I think that there's many ways as human beings that we are sort of violent without even realizing it, or we cause harm to others without realizing it. And I think for me, those are the moments that are really important, to actually more and more become conscious of, our own, just the ways in which we can be sarcastic or like moody, or this kind of things that we all kind of engage in sometimes. And, or even internally mad at somebody, but we don't even express it. But it's just actually really learning how to notice those things without blaming ourselves, because we're all human and it's part of human nature, but actually trying to renounce that kind of part of ourselves that wants to, like hurt other people in maybe just small ways, or put people down, or, be sarcastic or be superior, all of these little ways in which we, might behave, which is normal human behavior. A lot of it's accepted as normal, but it's
the people and maybe just small.
The sound went a bit weird there, but
it did. I'm trying to play around and get Dawn another link, because she hasn't found us, so I'm trying to do some multitasking. Dawn, sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, one thing I found, was really important for me, I don't know if I mentioned that in my talk, but I actually got into nonviolent communication as a way of speaking to people. And it's actually, it's a skillful means of communication, and it's especially useful intense or kind of challenging situations. So I mean, like we all, I think that, most of the time we're probably not struggling with being nonviolent, but there are times when especially if you have a relationship with somebody, and sometimes this might be your significant other, you can actually not know how to communicate in a skillful way. And, sometimes we just get really irritated or annoyed, and then we just say things we didn't mean to say. So I feel like we need to be taught how to communicate skillfully. And that's one thing I found has helped me immensely, is actually studying nonviolent communication. And there are lots of different branches of that, but the original one, which was written by Marshall Rosenberg, I just studied that, and it's actually quite simple, even though it's quite difficult to pull off, just because we're not used to it. But I was kind of shocked when I kind of started studying that, because he points out all the ways in which we were violent without realizing it in our speech patterns. And I just started to realize, oh my God, yeah, it's really true how we judge other people, and and like it's quite delicate when it comes down to it, when you start to study that and you realize all these ways in conversation that we can be disrespectful and unkind. And often we don't mean to be that way, but they're just kind of the ways that we've been conditioned to be with each other. And yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and there's a sort of, I know from my part, it can just be a sort of lack of putting care into it. I'd be really interested to find out about that book. I wonder if Raki might be able to give us a link to it. She's always very good at finding links so that we can all take a look at that.
Yeah, that would be great. It's just called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. But that book, I found that book really amazing. And I realized that I'd never really been taught skills. I always thought, of course I can communicate. I know how to communicate. But I realized that after I read that book, I realized that it's a really important subject. We're not really taught. Like would be a great subject to teach at school, for example, how to communicate, and especially in charged situations.
Yes.
Where you can easily lose it, and say things you didn't mean to say, and and react, because we're very reactive as human beings. And also, if somebody says something that we don't like about us, for example, we can be very really react in a very knee-jerk way, or when sometimes people push in front of you in a queue or something, or in traffic, like we can easily lose it for a moment,
Absolutely.
And, so it's just really interesting to it was just really enlightening for me to actually learn that there's actually ways that you can communicate in difficult situations that don't cause the other person to react, or to feel attacked. And
that sounds amazing, and something that I definitely need to get my hands on. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's right. There's violence in so many different areas of our life. It's like the obvious ones are the ones I know in the link when we were talking about that we were going to do it. The vegetarianism is something that a lot of people were struck by, but also it's sort of a more subtle violence to ourselves. And we've had the same thing here. It links to self-care. When I'm rested and well fed, I'm more thoughtful. When tired and hungry, I can get more reactive. And I think that's absolutely right. And that sort of violence to ourselves is like a violence that we can spread to others because we're not feeling kind to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're dead right. Like, you have to start with yourself. Like I think nonviolence always starts with practicing nonviolence towards yourself. And I think that we just need to have most of us need to have a lot more compassion for ourselves than we actually have, because we're constantly, I think most of us have that little voice inside our head that is constantly putting us down, putting ourselves down.
Yes.
Part of you that just doesn't feel good enough or adequate enough, or is embarrassed or shy or ashamed, or like we're just constantly berating ourselves. And I think that's, practicing nonviolence has to start with practicing that towards yourself, because you have to see, I was just talking about seeing others, all sentient beings, as yourself, but then you also have to respect and love yourself in that same way. And if you can't start with yourself, it's like you can't really progress from there. I think you can't love other human beings without loving yourself first.
Yeah, and that's something which I know that a lot of people find tricky, and I do too, for sure. Because you're right, especially when I am trying to act in a kinder, more compassionate, non-violent way, and then when you pick up all the things that you say, you get frustrated with yourself and angry, and I'm sure that I'm not alone doing that.
Yeah. But I think, it's just like we have to see, because I think we also have this idea, that we should be perfect, and I mean, that's really unrealistic. And then we're imposing that idea on everybody else as well as ourselves, and it's so ridiculous, because nobody is perfect, and why should we have to be perfect? I do think we need to be doing our best, like, I think it's really good to be making effort to try to be kind and generous to other people, and to try not to cause harm. And then sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes and like you said, you might be tired or hungry, and something is affecting you, and maybe you just lose that ability to be that way. And then but then you have to just let go of it. You can't hold on to a grudge with yourself, in the same way that you shouldn't hold on to a grudge with anyone else. So.
Yeah, right. Well, that's true, because we do hold on to this idea of perfectionism. I'm going to see if because I know, well, first of all, I just wanted to sort of have a little a sort of overview of how is it that this, do you think, how has it affected you running a business and running Sura Leela and trying to be a yogi and stick by the Yoga Sutras? How has that actually affected you and how you run the business, do you think?
Well, I think I'm, like, I'm constantly in terms of running a business, it's a big thing, and I'm constantly trying to find out what's the right way to do this, and how can I do this effectively, and how can I listen to other people but still be the authority. It's an interesting journey. I mean, I don't think I've got that really, I don't know if I've got it down, but I do feel like I'm friends with my staff, so I do feel like it's always interesting, because being here is a bit different from running a business where you go home at 5 o'clock and you don't see everybody till the next day. I mean, because this is a small community here, because a lot of the staff live on the premises or next door, like a staff house. So, and people eat together, and so actually our social life are also our colleagues at work, which I think happens as well. But I mean, I don't have a social life much outside of my work colleagues, and so it's quite different, because they're also friends. So sometimes I feel like sometimes being someone's friend and their boss is a bit challenging. So I feel like I just have to constantly be vigilant and alert to, how I'm behaving and how I talk to people. And I know whenever I have to talk to a staff member, I always find, like, using nonviolent communication. I kind of plan it out before I speak, because I think, it's just so important to be very, very careful in the way you address things. And I found that nonviolent communication helps me a lot with that, knowing how to address things.
That sounds like something I need to learn.
And one of the things that was most difficult for me in recent times, the last months, has been I had to lay off people.
Oh, gosh.
And that was really, I mean, I'm still not sure if I'm going to have to lay off more people. So it's just, it's just, that's been extremely hard, because there are people that really are dedicated to the business, and I really love the people that work here, and I feel like we have an amazing team of people here. And I think that we really do run the business differently than a regular business, because there is this sense of people being, encouraged to contribute, to really express themselves, and to be heard and accepted, and be part of a team. So, and I feel like, all of the things that, Eastern philosophy helps me in everything. I always just don't say yogic philosophy, because actually the philosophy that I'm more in love with is Vedanta, and yoga is part of Vedanta, but it's a bigger thing than just yoga philosophy. So so Vedanta is what really informs everything I do. It just helps me to understand how to respond to all kinds of situations, and mostly because I don't really take life that seriously, to be honest. Because what I understand from my knowledge of Eastern philosophy is just that that this is like a dream. This life is like a play. It's a Maya. It's in some ways it's illusory, like a dream world, and that it's ultimately a kind, or sometimes it's called a leela. A leela is a play of the gods. So that's where the leela in Surya Leela comes from. It's cosmic play. So I don't take life that seriously, actually. And I always also trust that whatever is unfolding is exactly as it's meant to be. And that helps me immensely in everything, And so I feel completely surrendered to what is. That's what really kind of guides me. But maybe I'm moving away from Ahimsa.
Well, no, there's a lot there to delve into. I'm sort of a bit torn there. We've got a few reactions and questions. I wanted to go back to Dawn's questions because she had a few quite specific ones.
Okay.
Dawn, who came to Surya Leela with our group a couple of years ago, so it's nice that you're here with Vidya, Dawn. Okay, I've learned so much from listening, watching Philosophy course by Vidya, and have learned to appreciate on a much deeper level the significance of the restraints and observances that a modern yogi needs to encompass into their lives to support the 8 limbs. I'd love to know how Vidya came to yoga and how she was able to practice all this herself. And then there's a second limb to the question. Let's go for the first limb.
Oh, the first part. How did I come to it? Well, like I said, I actually grew up in a really conservative middle class family. They were also quite secular. My dad was an atheist, and I didn't grow up with religion. In fact, I was actually not allowed to go to the religious classes at school, and I didn't really mind. Because I wasn't brought up as a Christian, so I didn't mind not going to the religious classes. But so I didn't grow up with any kind of religion, and my dad was kind of more a scientist, but I always felt like something was like really missing from my life, and I always was wondering what's the point of everything. And I was lucky when I was 13 that my aunt married a philosophy lecturer. And he and I really hit it off. Like, if I was 13 at the time, but he was a really lovely man, and he was very interested, and he liked kids as well. But he loved to talk to kids and really talk to you. And nobody had really spoken to me before deeply, And so I got into loads of deep conversations with him. And he told me, "You're a born philosopher, because I'd never, I didn't know that a lot of the questions that I had were kind of philosophical questions. I didn't really know what philosophy was when I was 13. So I became interested in philosophy, and I went to university to study philosophy. But what was really interesting was that when I was studying Western philosophy, and it just wasn't doing it for me. I just felt like I thought I was a philosopher, but now I'm studying Western philosophy. It's not really. I just don't feel that attuned to it. And then actually, it was back in the 70s. It was like I was a hippie, actually. I dropped out and I was doing LSD, and it was like, you know, those kinds of times. And I got introduced to Buddhism by a friend, so I just started to just see all kinds, you know, understand all kinds of dimensions of life that I'd never even like known existed. And I got into Buddhism when I was like 19, 20, and I started meditating as well. And I started going to this Buddhist center in London and meditating a lot. And yeah, that was my first year of just getting into Eastern philosophy, and I got really into meditation that year. And I just started reading all kinds of books, you know, like I just started reading every book on Eastern philosophy that I could get a hold of. I read thousands of books on it. And I just felt like this is what I was looking for. You know, when I was interested in philosophy all my life, I didn't realize that this was, I just started to find answers that I didn't really find in Western philosophy. So yeah, and then I went to India, and yeah, that's how I got started.
Oh, I love it. Now, the next part of Dawn's questions, I'd love to know how different your life would be without yoga. Can you imagine it, Vidya?
I can't, because I just cannot imagine it. I have no idea, you know, I just can't really imagine it, because I've been into this, yeah, since I was 19. So I don't know where my life would have gone, and who knows? I mean, maybe I would have. I never really wanted to get married and have kids, and my parents would have loved me to marry a doctor or a lawyer and have a family and live in a nice house, and I never wanted that. You know, I just was really pursuing. Once I, you know, found my passion, I just pursued it really my whole life. I just went deeper and deeper into it, and yeah, I've been, and also I was really into. I've never been actually into being fixed anywhere. I was always quite into moving around, traveling. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I can answer that, because it would have been an alternate life, and I was never really. I guess I was never really going to go there, because my karma was otherwise. You know.
Yeah. I think that's fair enough. Now, she has one final question. Meditation, does it take years to really get to grips with it?
I don't think it has to. No, I think that actually, you know, when I first discovered meditation, I was really excited about it. I just found that, you know, it was very profound for me right away. You know, and you know, and then I find, like, as you know, meditate more and more, it's not something that, you know, if you do it, you get better and better at it. You always have to deal with the same stuff, you know, like when you're meditating. So you might just get more familiar with it and maybe more at ease with meditating. But I don't really think that, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think it's like some things where the more you do it, the better you get at it. You know, I think you just have to, you know, sometimes it can be really hard, even though you might have been doing it for years and years and years. And sometimes you might find, because it's not really about whether it's hard or easy, actually, it's a practice. So when you do a practice, it's like your yoga practice. Sometimes you feel, you know, like, oh, this practice feels so amazing, and I feel so coordinated and light and airy, and my practice, you know, I'm just loving practicing. And other times I feel like my body's made of lead and I don't want to really move, and I'm feeling very resistant. You know that? And you can't tell, you know, like it could, for whatever reason, you know, you're always in a different mindset. So you've got the same things to face, but this is a practice. So I think the important thing to know about meditation is that it doesn't have to be a particular way. I think the reason that we might say it's hard, or I had a bad meditation, that's like you're judging your meditation. And you should never do that with meditation, because meditation is a practice, and you just do it, and it doesn't matter whether your experience is good or bad, because it's not about your experience. It's not an experience, it's a practice.
Yeah, that's a really useful way of seeing it. I like that. that little twist. And yes, going back to the subject of Ahimsa, now we're bouncing back again, and non-violent communication. I'm now just going through some of the comments on that. Again, Dawn, reacting people who are being unkind, negative can be challenging not to take it personally. And I have exactly that problem too, because you sometimes feel that it's a sort of personal affront and that things are taken personally and that it's because of you. And then you can react back in that way. Do you have any tips for how we can try to stop that sort of spiral of reactivity?
Yeah, well, I think actually, interestingly, because we were just talking about meditation, and I think that really helps us to develop that muscle of non-reactivity. Because what we're doing when we meditate is we're practicing having no relationship to the content of our own mind. And we're doing that over and over. So that's the practice that we need to bring into life, is that, we can have, we're going to have a relationship with the content of our own mind, but we want to have the right relationship with it. So the wrong relationship would be just believing whatever your mind throws up and going with it, like reacting. And meditation helps to give us that space where we see the whole thing. You see somebody say something mean to you, you feel the reaction within yourself. You can see how you might having a knee-jerk response of feeling upset or angry, and how you want to respond in kind, But then you actually, this all happens very quickly. You're just able to take a breath and not, and just see it's ego, actually. You just see, okay, that's ego. We all have an ego. So the ego is always going to respond with, self-defense, with reactivity, with wanting to lash back if somebody hurts you. It's just the nature of the ego, and you can actually observe the egoic responses in yourself, and then you can just say that it's just ego, and you can say that 1,000 times a day, because the ego rears its ugly head all the time, So there's gonna be moments where you feel envious, where you feel jealous, where you feel competitive, where you feel hurt, whatever. Feel left out. I don't know what it is. All these things. But then just observing those things and actually just always labeling them as, oh, that's the ego, And then you just don't identify with it, But I think that comes through two things. Meditation can help immensely with that, and also just really understanding human nature deeply, which meditation helps with as well, but also actually just studying the scriptures helps a lot with that. And so it's just knowledge. I mean, it's said in Eastern philosophy, they say our main obstacle is ignorance. It's ignorance as to who we are. So we're identifying with the ego. So when you think you are the ego, the doer, the experiencer, then you identify with all these responses. So when you know that that's not who you are, and we need to have this ego in order to operate in the world. We have this body, we have this mind, and we're using it to operate in the world. But when we know that it's not who we really are, and that we're not the ego, then we just see we're the one witnessing it all. We're witnessing everything. We're witnessing everything unfolding around us. We're witnessing our own reactions. And then when we just say and then when we shift our identification to the witness, we know that we're not the ego. We can just look at our egoic responses and just label them as ego. And they actually, I find when you do that, they tend to just dissolve, because you see that that's not you. But it's just a natural human response that we can actually choose not to engage in. We can choose to not react in that way. And sometimes it takes, I'm not saying this always happens automatically, because sometimes, you might have some particularly tough thing, some particularly tough encounter with somebody or experience, or somebody tells you something And it might take you a few hours to grapple with it, like to let it go.
Mm.
So, but that's okay. I think you can just take yourself off and just, grapple with it for a little while, and then allow it to, let go of it, and sometimes it's not always immediate if it's something big.
And that idea of sort of taking yourself away from that moment of reactivity, I think can be a useful one, because sometimes we kind of get stuck in that moment. So being able to kind of have some space to see things for what they are.
Yeah, sometimes you do need to step back and just almost it's almost just like just to come to terms with whatever it was. But I find like when I do that, it can be very quickly resolved. Like I just know, I can let things go very quickly. But I think that is through, really, like I said, really understanding who you are and who you're not, and not identifying with these egoic responses and just actually seeing them for what they are. But
Love it. No, that's really, really useful, Vidya. Thank you. We've got a very interesting question from Judah. I hope I've pronounced it right. What's the purpose of a practice then? That was such an interesting idea for me, and we need to rewind in time to try to work out which idea, but I think that was about the meditation as a practice.
What's the purpose of a practice?
Yeah. She said, I always thought the more you meditate, the better you become at bringing yourself back to the moment. But what do you think, Vidya?
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that it doesn't have a cumulative effect, but it's like, I think, because I was just saying that some meditations might be really turbulent, some meditations might feel really calm, but it doesn't really matter what the content of your mind is. You're just sitting there with it, So what I was trying to say was there's no good or bad meditation, but I wasn't saying that it doesn't have a cumulative effect. Like when you do that practice on a regular basis, it does have an effect. And the effect is that you start to have a deeper understanding of your human nature. And you also do create space, like you are able to, it will start to inform your everyday life. And like you'll start to have, you'll actually have more space around the way that you react or respond to things. You'll start responding rather than reacting, let's say.
Yeah.
And it'll also help you in these moments where you're grappling with stuff, because it just gives you a lot more space, and you also know that you don't have to, whatever's going on in your mind is going to pass. You learn that with meditation. It's all going to pass. It's all going to be meaningless in a few days or a few weeks or a few months, so you just learn to not take the content of your own mind too seriously through meditation. And the other point of it really is you're actually training the spiritual muscle in a way, because we need to kind of learn self-discipline, and I find like meditation is a form of self-discipline, and and that can seem like a bit of a intense word to us, because we'd often associate discipline with being, control or something like that. But I think it's really important to have some discipline in your life and to have spiritual practices and to stay with them.
Yeah.
I think that just gives you self-confidence and self-esteem when you do that. When you say that you're going to follow through on a practice, and you do, and then you just keep doing it, and it builds, it just builds natural self-esteem and self-confidence in yourself. And I think we all need to do that. Otherwise it can be all over the place. So it's I think having a practice is a profound thing,
and we talk about that with tapas really as well, don't we?
Yeah.
Which is unfortunately not the delicious little nibble.
Well, it is as well.
But yeah, I think that's sort of all part of it. Now, because I know that on the movers group there were a few people who were interested in ahimsa, vegetarianism, veganism.
Yeah.
I think it would be useful to just sort of go there a little bit. I mean, I'm going to give my little view on it first. It's just my view. And I know, Vidya, you have your view, and everyone kind of comes to their own place on these things. I mean, I've been a vegetarian since I was small, since I was a teenager, before a teenager, I think, because I've always really liked animals. And I went along to a factory farm at a young age, and it really, really disturbed me. And I thought right there and then, how can we do this to something which, it was a pig farm, and I could easily see myself in the pigs. I saw that was a very clear thing as a child for me. And I was vegetarian for years, and veganism seemed like something that was very extreme at that stage, and it has done until quite recently. And then I visited a dairy farm, and I became aware of some of the practices that are used at the normal dairy farms, and I realized that that's not acceptable to where I feel, in the treatment of animals, because again, to me, animals, and I'm an animal so far as I'm concerned, so there's not much difference. But having said that, I have now sort of slightly come full circle, and I've found an Ahimsa micro dairy, which is up the road from me here, which I support because I think, first of all, their raw milk is delicious, but there's a young guy who's got a few cows, and he keeps the calves, and it's very, like, in terms of harm to the planet, it's very sort of sustainable, very low key, and it's very grounded in reality. And I sort of have that feeling about, because you have chickens at Sierra Leela, and I think that if I had chickens roaming around in the way that you did at Sierra Leela, that's no problem to eat those eggs. So I think everybody's got their little dividing lines with what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because I have had some moral dilemmas about. I'm fine. I mean, I've been vegetarian since I was 16. So, and I don't eat cow products either. So I'm sort of semi-vegan, but I do eat our chicken eggs because, like you said, we have happy chickens here, and also, actually, people say, well, you're taking their babies away, but actually they don't sit on all the eggs. So the ones that they sit on, we leave because then we get more chickens. But the ones that they don't sit on, we can take. So it's not doing them any harm, and our chickens are really happy, and they eat our compost, as well. They eat everything. So all of our organic compost goes to the chickens. But it's really interesting with the permaculture thing, because most people who are into permaculture, because we have a big permaculture project here, should mention, and so I've gotten really into permaculture in the last 6 years or so. Since
you got me into permaculture too, Vidya. It's catchy.
And it's quite interesting because people who are really into permaculture are not into vegetarianism. And the reason why is that they're into the ecosystem, and traditionally an ecosystem, you have to have animals in the ecosystem, and the animals are really needed for their for their fertilization of the soil, and also because they eat all the kind of grass and seeds and the olive shoots that come off the olive trees, and so they're very useful. They're really part of the whole ecosystem. And traditionally, you obviously eat the animals, so there's a bit of a clash there between the kind of traditional idea of vegetarianism from yoga, which I still stick with. But I've started to be little bit more sympathetic towards, because I thought, well, that's easy. I think you saw our movie, the Syrian movie, but
great movie, by the way. Everyone must watch it. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it's not available it's not available right now because it's actually in some film festivals right now, and but we're going to be showing it when we come to do our yoga summit which has been put off a bit now. I think we're going to do it at the beginning of December, so I have to talk about that later. But anyway, we're going to show the film in our yoga summit. But you see this dilemma in the film. We have a documentary that was made about Surya Leela, and like, well, I was thinking, okay, well, we can just have some sheep, and we don't have to eat them. But then we had this kind of issue, like, okay, so are we only going to have female sheep? So, so that they don't have babies? Because then what if we have all these babies and our flock keeps growing and growing? We're going to have to cull them in some way, So I don't know. There's lots of complications, like when you have animals, if you don't eat them, what do you do with the, because actually also a lot of animals you can't have more than, because they don't, you can't, it's not normal for a flock to be made up of half male and half females. That's really interesting. I mean, they fight. Like we have that with the alpacas. Not that you eat alpacas, but you can't have more than one male with the females. It gets really complicated. So, animal husbandry is something I didn't really know anything about. But
I can't wait for it.
Within a farm system, it's quite difficult if you don't eat the animals. Like I cause all kinds of complications by not wanting to eat the animals. So I don't know. I think sometimes at one point I had to say, well, you might have to take the male baby lambs off somewhere and just not tell me about it, and sell them, because I felt like, well, now I'm in the meat production thing, but we really need the sheep to fertilize the ground and to eat so yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. But I do think, like what you were talking about, like if you're getting, if you're going to a farm where that the animals are treated humanely, and they're and they're having a good life.
And I think having a small number is key.
Yeah, but I mean, so there is one issue with that, though, which I discovered when I watched this really good documentary called Cowspiracy.
Oh my goodness. I recommend everyone has to watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah, which is about the sustainability of vegetarianism, actually, and veganism, or the non-sustainability of meat eating, I should say it's about. But I think you learn in that movie that even if you had like small organic grass-fed farms, if we wanted to produce enough meat for the whole planet, we'd have to eat another 10 planets if we were going to.
That's true.
Actually, what's interesting about feedlot farms and that kind of thing, the industry of meat, is it's the only way that we can sustainably produce enough meat for the amount of meat that we're eating.
But that's the key thing.
That we just can't eat, I mean, we could eat if you're not becoming vegetarian, you could eat way less meat, because we can't sustain the amount of meat. And I personally also think that I'm really into nutrition as well. And I kind of know that eating a lot of meat is not healthy anyway. I mean, actually a lot of people say that eating any meat at all is unhealthy. So, and dairy is also unhealthy. So I think really, like, for health reasons, of course you still need to know how to nourish yourself properly, because a lot of people say, oh, I became vegan and I wasn't doing well. I was losing a lot of weight. I felt weak. And then I realized I had to start eating meat again. And then I felt a lot better. But I think that happens because people don't really know enough about nutrition. And if you become vegan and you're just eating pasta and pizza, or vegetarian, you're just eating pasta and pizza and processed foods or whatever, you're obviously going to feel weak, but I think that we can get all the nutrition that we need if we're eating the right foods. And maybe we can take some supplements if needed. But I just feel like I've been radiantly healthy my whole life. I'm 65 now, and I've been vegetarian since I was 16. And I mean, I think also it's yoga, but I feel like diet plays a huge part of it. And I don't have good genes. I have all kinds of disease in my family. So I managed to evade all of that. So far, touch wood. But I feel like, diet is such an important part of maintaining
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
your whole life.
Yeah, I do. And I think that I'm just conscious of the time and people want to start cooking dinner. I do. I think my thoughts on how to read Ahimsa in the food production is, I think that this is one area where it's so important to really, really think very carefully, because we all, by necessity, have to consume a lot. And we might affect each other's choices in their consumption as well. So I think that it's very, very important to think very clearly about what ethical choices you can make for yourself. We all have to come up with our own. But for me, it's definitely about the sustainability aspect. What is most sustainable for us and for the planet?
Yeah.
That's important, because I think that's non-violence to the planet. You don't get big from that.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I also, I mean, I think a big thing for me, like, is also just the treatment of animals, because I just can't handle it, you know. And I hate watching these videos from the, you know, like about what goes on in those factory slaughterhouses, you know.
Yeah, it's hideous.
Just horrible, the practices and what the animals go through. I just really can't handle that. So I feel like what you said, we have to educate ourselves. We have to make intelligent choices. And I think that's part of being a yogi, really, is actually making intelligent choices about everything. We shouldn't just do what we're conditioned to do.
Yeah.
We should just try to think deeply about all of the choices that we're making, you know, and like come to a conclusion that we feel good with, you know, because I just wouldn't feel good about eating animals. I just wouldn't feel good about putting animals through any pain, like you see in the slaughterhouses, and the fear and pain and the horrible lives that they have to live, you know, to provide us with meat. I just think it's all really awful, you know, and that it's cruel. So anyway, I just think it's important that everybody thinks deeply about you know what they're doing. And if you do eat meat, you can go to, you know, at least you know where the meat's coming from, and you really make that ethical choice to actually know that it's been treated humanely.
And I think we've had
go have dinner now. So
yeah, no. Well, there's one I'd like to end just on this point, because this is down to earth. Pauline, cost is important, especially during COVID, where loads of people, you know, there is a lot of people suffering financially. For me, I see that, well, there's nothing cheaper than eating beans and potatoes. So I find it quite hard to understand why people think necessarily that junk food is cheaper when, you know, beans are as cheap as you get. But also allotments and growing your own, especially if you've been laid off and you have lots of time. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but it is making sort of lemons out of lemonade.
Yeah, definitely. Growing your own vegetables would be ideal. But I mean, I think you can, you know, like I think you're right. Maybe it's a bit more effort. I mean, it's very easy to walk into McDonald's and pay
more effort.
very little but you know, you have to make a bit more effort with your food. But I mean, what I used to do, I mean, I'm in the luxurious situation of being cooked for every day.
Oh, your food is incredible.
Food, you know, so I've got nothing to complain about at all, and it's very easy for me, you know. But when I used to cook for myself, I sometimes would make a pot of soup that lasted for 3 or 4 days, and I'd happily eat the same soup for 3 or 4 days, you know, because I know I'm busy, you know. So, and making a salad really takes 10 minutes, you know, and you can put everything in it, you know. Like I used to make all kinds of amazing salads and just put everything in it, you know, like as many colors as I could. And but it literally takes you 10 minutes. So that's really doable. And if you're going to buy, you know, if you're going to go to Whole Foods, yeah, it can be really expensive. I know. I mean, I always spend more money on food and supplements than anything else, because listen, if you get sick, you have to spend a lot of money on hospitalization, on medicine, and on, you know, on losing work. And if you stay healthy, it's really worth spending as much money as you can afford to on food and supplements, because that's what keeps you healthy. So I always think it's a fair trade, you know. And But, you know, if you can't buy organic food, then buy non-organic vegetables, you know, and it's fine. Eat non-organic broccoli and kale, but just wash it really well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that now there are so many massive topics that we can go running into, and good points from Alex. Would like to see fresh produce subsidized, junk food taxed more.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And poor people are heavily targeted by junk companies and businesses and pester power for their children. So I get it. If you have a kid, they're not going to be so keen on cats, beans, and potatoes diet. So I understand. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the modern world which seems to sort of go against good sense and good health, and I suppose that's what we all have to stick with each other.
Yeah.
Oh, Vidya, it's so lovely to chat to you. We could chat together here for hours about this, and I know that you guys would like to join in, and it's really, really great. Now, we are going to catch up again at the end of the month when hopefully we'll find out how everyone's got on with all the videos, and that'll be we can carry on and see where the conversation takes us then.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to support us. And thank you, Vidya, so much for your time. I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome. I really enjoyed talking to you.
It's really wonderful. And I'm definitely going to check out that nonviolent communication book. It's awesome.
Okay, really cool. Okay.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.